This is Joe Bava, but this is who he really is.
I want point back and this and ban all too. This
An insane mixture of genius, rage, zero fashion sense, and a dash of racism. A lot like all the great minds we hold dear today. He got himself banned from all professional chess activities for a long while. His crime? Timing. In a fit of rage, he said some mean things about people from this part of the world, at a time when he should know better. This is 2024, you can only make fun of people from this general area. Yes, them, and the French for some reason. But before he faded into the shadows, Joe Bava left behind a parting gift to the chess world, the Joe Bava London system. Why? Because he had an intense unending hatred of how modern chess has devolved into a memory contest. Memorize endless disgusting computer lines, and then regurgitate them all over the chessboard, rinse that, and repeat. It's no wonder the world's top player right now has an eidetic photographic memory. But the Joe Bava London system is built different. It's bizarre, unconventional and downright weird. The positions it leads to are so removed from traditional chess, that even players rated 2,800 are falling for tactics as basic as this. Knight b5, and how do you stop knight takes c7 check? And then, there's this position. Moves like knight f3 or bishop e2 might seem natural, but no, this is the Joe Bava London system. Enter f3, g4 and h4. The real question here is there a method to all this madness? For those who appreciate my humor and offbeat commentary, trust me, you're in for a treat today. We're diving deep into the Joe Bava London system, how trickery and traps destroy 1,000 rated players. But how about the psychopath-like positional torture of players above 2,000? Yes, we've got that as well. We'll also look at a strange game that sparked an intense rivalry, one that eventually led to the cheating scandal that's rocking the chess world right now. And in case you're wondering whose side I'm on, well, we'll also study how the legend Joe Bava himself annihilated Nepo with his signature opening. And just to make you smile a little wider, this is Mortal Chess. You know I always bring a bonus. We'll finish with two 500 rated players, trading blows in a cheeky lighthearted showdown. So, sit back, relax and enjoy. But before you drop a Joe Mama joke in the comments, remember the hippopotamus opening? I've got all my comebacks ready. d4 d5, knight c3 c6 and bishop f4, is the Joe Bava London system. On both sides of the board are two stubborn 1300s from lichess.org, the best chess website in the world. And it shall remain so until chess.com responds to my emails. Knight f6 develops a piece, and after e3, completing the Joe Bava London setup, black advances with bishop g4. If you paid close attention to the intro, you might already know white's response, f3. But after bishop h5, you may not be aware of the nasty trap set by h4 in this position because, after the normal looking move e6, black loses a piece. I'd ask you to pause and try to figure it out, but it's too early in the video to give you that crippling feeling of worthlessness. So, g4 attacks the bishop, and after it retreats to g6, h4 is the killer move. This bishop is trapped. In this position, black settled for knight takes h5, sacrificing the knight instead. But the engine recommends bishop takes h5, keeping the knight. Why? First, because the position is somewhat closed and a bit claustrophobic on the king side. Knights generally fare better than bishops in closed positions. Secondly, this is a light squared setup, and the pawns are already doing most of the bishop's work, making it redundant. So, giving it up is the engine recommended move. But in the game, we saw knight takes h5, pawn takes, and the bishop found a home on f5. There is something weirdly fascinating about the Joe Bava London system. White played bishop g3, seeking to trade these bishops, a principled move. Why? Let's take a look at the number of moves this bishop has made compared to the other, which has only moved once. From an accounting standpoint, if black trades bishops, he's technically 3 moves behind, as made obvious by white's 3 developed pieces to black's 0. Moral of the story: don't invest multiple moves into a single piece if it can be traded in one move. The most important chess principle. Right up there with hit the report button after a brutal loss. Anyway, h6 was played by black because, after e4, takes, the bishop would then have a safe square on h7, or so I thought. Black plays bishop g4, hitting the queen, a great move supported by a knight, which unfortunately, is no longer with us. The bishop is a free piece, but before you judge black, such blunders are weirdly common in the Joe Bava London system. Beginner to intermediate players who are used to playing symmetrical positions often struggle with simple things in unfamiliar territory. Kinda like when you have the swagger of a South African, and then the physics teacher calls your name, with a simple question. What's the difference between mass and weight? This is a great setup for a Joe Mama joke, but we're trying to attract sponsors here. Knight d7 is played, and after castles and queen e7, I'd personally be looking to play d5, blasting the center open. That's what you do if your opponent's king is uncastled, and that's what you do if you have a bishop pair. But the engine recommends knight f3, taking your time and not lunging for your opponent's throat. And guess what move was played? Knight f3. I'm no Vladimir Kramnik fan, but as black, that report button would be looking all kinds of irresistible in this position. Black, however, decided to throw a huge temper tantrum. That's when you go into self-destruct mode and lose all your pieces on purpose. Takes, and instead of recapturing, black plays bishop h6, putting his bishop in prime fork territory. Knight takes f7 check, and black resigns, an end to one player's misery and the beginning of another's. This game is for the higher-rated naysayers who claim that the job of London is just a filthy bag of tricks. d4 d5, knight c3 e6, and bishop f4 is the strongest way to start a chess game with the white pieces. On meds, a player I know well, and can confirm is no longer on any meds, went for knight b5 in this position. But is he really going for this basic trick against a 2100? I chose this game to show you that studying Grandmaster games for chess improvement is often a waste of time. Even I don't understand half of them. There's a lot of educational value in the simplicity of games played by 2000 level players in the classics. Knight a6 is played, defending the very obvious attack, and white responds with e3. But after c6 and the knight's retreat to c3, it may feel like white has achieved nothing by spending a couple of moves. Positional chess is all about control of squares and space on the chessboard. Black's knight would love to be on the c6 square, exerting control over the center, but it's now sidelined and in the firing line of the bishop. Bishop d6 is played, challenging the influence of white's bishop and preparing to castle, but on meds gives away his bishop for a knight and shifts the game toward a positional battle. After takes, and knight f3, we reach a position where black has a bishop for white's knight, but in exchange, black has doubled pawns that are weak, and white has a bind on this light squared structure limiting the mobility of the bishop. As a positional chess master, you have to assess the pieces on the board and create a position that favors them. That's why, after rook b8, rook b1, and castling by both sides, black plays c5 to open up the position for his bishop. But on the opposite side, white knows that keeping the position somewhat closed and creating a bind on these two dark squares is key to victory. If this knight makes it to c5, only one piece on the board can remove it. So knight a4 is played, and after exchanges, the knights are set to dominate the center. Black plays knight e4, preventing knight c5, but white offers a knight trade with knight d2. Black declines with f5. And here white could have played knight b3 so that if a knight occupies c5 and is captured, the other knight will recapture and stay there permanently. But f3 does a decent job, and the knight retreats to f6. Before white occupies the juicy c5 square with the knight, he makes it known that he's aware of the weakness created by f5, a backward pawn, meaning it can't be defended by another pawn, so pieces will have to cover it. Queen b4 attacks both this knight and the annoying d4 pawn. Can you find the move that defends both pieces? c3 protects d4, discovers the queen's protection of the knight, and, as a bonus, hits the queen, forcing a retreat. A move as strong as that midnight urge to procreate with our favorite chess streamer. Are there any men of culture watching my channel? Let me know you approve this commentary. The queen retreats to b5, and finally, the knight finds a home on c5. Such a square is called an outpost in positional terms, a square in the opponent's territory where you can plant a piece that's not easily dislodged. It may seem like this knight isn't doing much here, but don't underestimate its pain in the ass effect on your opponent. As white, you can simply plant it on c5 and focus on other things, but your opponent must constantly account for its influence with every move. So black plays queen c6, adding more defense to e6, but knight b3 is another knight waiting for its turn to occupy c5. If this knight is traded, it also prevents a5, so after queen e2, black is now fully tied to defending weak pawns. All material is equal, but what move or plan can you even suggest for black here? This is a stone-cold positional beatdown. Black's hopelessness is clear with his next move. King h8. A nothing move, because after queen e2, guess what move the engine recommends for black? Yes, king g8. But black opted for rook e8, adding yet another defender to the e6 weakness. White continues to pile on the pressure, and black continues to add defenders until a point of deadlock. After this, white plays the subtle move h3, with the idea of g4. Why? White wants to create a new attack front on the king side, which is what you do whenever you feel you have your opponent's throat in hand but he's defending well. As the aggressor, your pieces aren't tied to defending weaknesses and can shift to attack much faster than your opponent's. Black senses the potential threat and offers a queen trade. I'd give it some thought before accepting, but on meds felt he could get the job done without the queens. After takes, and knight d7 followed by takes, white plants the second knight on c5, attacking the bishop. Now, unless black sacrifices a rook, no piece can ever touch this knight, and as long as white maintains a bind on these pawns, the bishop will forever be useless. If you've ever heard masters say good knight versus bad bishop, this is what they mean. Bishops aren't always better than knights, and with some positional knowledge, we can make bishops look really ineffective. Chess is a beautiful game. Hit the like button if you agree. Black initiates a trade of f-pawns, opening a file that looks like it's only usable by white's rooks. However, black has a tiny issue: 3 attackers versus 2 defenders on e6. So bishop b5 is played, reinforcing the rook's protection of the pawn and also covering f1 to prevent any annoying rook checks. Double purpose. Like, when you realize that your home defense tool can also be used to motivate your spouse to join you in bed. Sophisticated. And if you've used this tactic, let us know when your court date is. Anyway, a4 attempts to dislodge the bishop, but it finds a new home on c4. You could technically call this an outpost, but some outposts are more equal than others. a5 attacks the rook, which moves to c6, keeping an eye on e6. Every piece on the board is either useless or tied to the e6 pawn. Except for one, white's king on g1. Materially speaking, everything is equal, but white essentially has an extra piece in the game. That's the power of positional chess. White brings his king up, and black can do nothing but watch until after king h6, where black is out of moves. How do you protect h7 without losing e6? You can't. After a few moves, both pawns fall, and this game is all but over. But just how badass is it to take your king, the most vulnerable piece on the board, all the way from g1 deep into enemy territory to finish the job, while the other pieces watch? Chess is simple, but playing simple chess? Well, that takes skill. For my European viewers, I'm reminded of an incredible defensive midfielder who played for Barcelona. If you know, you know. And for my American viewers, where's my favorite president? Anyway, instead of losing slowly, black opted to get checkmated on f5. Ending a game showcasing a style of play that every Caro-Kann player out there would appreciate. But if you're here for fireworks, it's July 15, 2024, on chess.com. Yes, chess.com, pure American greed in the form of a gaming website. Starting April 1st next year, I hear only Diamond members will have access to pre-moves. Insane. But here, Danya Naroditsky is taking on Vladimir Kramnik in the third of a series of games, none of which went Kramnik's way. d4 knight f6 knight c3 and bishop f4, once again, sets up the Joe Bava London system. Kramnik goes for an instant c5. I'd reply with e3 here and then try to play for knight b5 ideas, but Danya goes knight c3. He's a super GM, he knows better. Or maybe it's all stockfish, who knows? I'm sure there's a universe in which Kramnik is right. And in that universe, you might be mortal chess, sitting alone in a dimly lit room at 3 a.m., writing this script in Zimbabwe. I'm the President of the United States, and I'm also dating Andrea Botez, by the way, because not only is the age difference totally okay in that universe, it's encouraged. Yes, such a world does exist, according to the many worlds interpretation of the double slit experiment. Again, high school physics. But let's not alienate our fellow South African viewers. e3 and e6 at the board, and after bishop d7, we get knight b5 by Danya. This knight isn't hanging, by the way, because after queen a5 check, there's a crazy line that eventually leads to knight c7 check, winning the rook. A line Danya calculated himself on the spot. Bishop takes b5 from Kramnik. He wants none of those complications, and after bishop takes b5 check and the knight blocks, we see c4 on the board. All kinds of chaos are about to ensue in the center of the board here. Personally, I'd be getting my king the hell out of there, but Danya does so, at the expense of a pawn. Weird, but after d takes e3, you'd expect the bishop to recapture, but no, he plays e takes d5 instead. Extremely weird. Kramnik, who fancies himself a cheating vigilante for the chess world, has likely hit the report button about 10,000 times by now. I think he's on a mission to bring back the glory days of chess, and I can respect that, because no matter how hard we try to prove to the world that chess players are not beta males, we have Danya Naroditsky working desperately against us. I mean, the sitting posture alone, just how many milligrams of ovulation hormones are coursing through his veins, do you think? Megatons. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm a huge Danya Naroditsky fan. He's done great work on my favorite opening after all. You guys should check it out. And as for this weirdness, I'm a measly 2200, and I can somewhat wrap my head around a plan to quickly clear the center when your opponent's king is still uncastled. Do I have the guts to do it like this? No, but is it basic attacking principle? Yes. Kramnik plays c takes d5, and after the brilliant knight e5, disgusted with his position after brutally losing the previous 2 games, Kramnik just lets his time run out, and has never played a single game with Danya since. But from Hikaru to Kirill, Danya, and legends like Hans Niemann, the greatest chess player to ever have a crush on Andrea Botez, let me know what you think about the severity of cheating in chess. Ironically, cheating is what sparked Joe Bava's outburst, which eventually led to his ban. But our flawed hero, who appears to be housing a tiny black hole in his mouth, is in action against Jan Nepomniachtchi in this game, and his opening of choice is the Joe Bava London system. Bishop f5 is played by Jan Nepomniachtchi, and if you're mildly cringing at that pronunciation, well, me too bro, but the robot voice stays. I'm considering making one video using my own voice to get your feedback, but I don't know if I'm emotionally prepared for comments like these. The bizarreness of the Joe Bava London system starts with the move f3 in this position, because e6, g4, and h4 quickly follow. But does Jan see that his bishop is lost after a move like h5? Of course he does. He's rated over 2800 FIDE. Joe Bava plays e3, and this is the position on the board. White has aggressively advanced his pawns and taken as much kingside space as he can, but as scary as this looks, a super grandmaster knows that none of these pawns can be advanced in a deadly way. It's just a little claustrophobic, that's all. Jan simply plays a6, stopping all knight b5 shenanigans. h5 hits the bishop, and after bishop d3, the bishops are traded, but instead of queen takes d3, Joe Bava takes with the pawn. Why? Because in this Caro-Kann-like setup that black has assumed, the key pawn break is c5. But after c5, takes, white will still have an extra pawn in the center. More pieces are developed, and both sides castle queenside. There's a temporary deadlock in the center and kingside. White can't make any progress without weakening his pawns, and Jan, who barring Magnus Carlsen, is arguably the strongest chess player in the world, will never feel suffocated and lash out with these types of weakening moves I see every day when playing 1000 rated players. Rook c1, Joe Bava slowly shifts focus to the queenside by putting his rook on a semi-open file. A file with only one pawn, your opponent's pawn. Unlike a fully open file, your rook can exert influence on all these squares without being challenged by an opposing rook. Some doubled pawns are more equal than others, and after bishop takes bishop by Jan, Joe Bava creates yet another doubled pawn weakness by capturing with a pawn. But are they really weaknesses? The engine somewhat agrees, but Magnus Carlsen famously believes that doubled pawns in the center of the board are more of an asset than they're given credit for. Look at all these squares they control. These knights won't be advancing onto any outposts anytime soon. This is the kind of mental torture that a normal grandmaster game is like. A bunch of maneuvers. Then finally, a pawn is pushed. Another series of maneuvers occur, and then Jan looks to the left, looks to the right, and then carefully pushes another pawn. I suggest you forget about your dreams of becoming a grandmaster because, honestly, I doubt any of them enjoy playing chess. You prepare for months, forget to get some rest, and then come game day, you play an exhausting series of 50 precise moves, gain a tiny advantage against the best in the world. Then, on move 51, you make a mistake that costs you the entire game. 5 minutes later, you Superman punch a camera lady, and then you get banned for a very long time. True story by the way. It looks like Joe Bava's dream is slowly coming true. Anyway, let me know if you still wish to become a grandmaster one day. Another series of captures occurs, after which the move knight d4 breathes some life into the game. This rook is attacked by the queen and also X-ray attacked by the other rook. Is Jan losing? No, a series of captures occur. Check, rook e5. And the engine says the position is dead equal. But what we have is an imbalance. A chess game can be equal and imbalanced. I'm talking about an unequal number of pawns on both sides. And for Joe Bava's queen, Jan has 2 rooks. That usually means that some chess will finally be played, and grandmasters will finally come out of their drawing hypnotic state, and showcase their skills. But my intention with this game is to show you just how hard chess is at the elite level. White has played 47 close to perfect moves to get to this endgame where he has a tiny advantage. But how do you convert it to a win? By playing another 40 correct moves, of course. After which you get to this endgame, which is technically winning with correct play, but I dare anyone up to 2400 to win this against Stockfish. After a lot of maneuvering, Joe Bava finally creates this position on the board where this rook has no checks, and any move by the king would either result in checkmate or loss of the rook. But if you're still watching, let me know what you would play if rook d4 check was thrown at your king. Yan Nepomniachtchi, who has recently taken to Twitter, subtly piling more cheating accusations on Hikaru and Danya, lost in the most long, drawn-out, and brutal way possible, to a man who is not perfect. A man who said some terrible things but, more importantly, a man who has served his punishment. I wish you all the best, Joe Bava. Jesus Christ said, "Let he who is without blame cast the first stone." Instructions unclear. Chess.com brought Abdul with the rocks. But since our best streamers are adamant that it's the best chess website in the world, I did create an account with them, and for some reason, they gave me a rating of 500. I made this video of a game I played especially for my patrons, but I decided to share it with all of you. They seem like a cool bunch, I'm sure they'll understand. Shout out to my main Italian man, Filippo, with an I at the start, which, one would assume stands for intelligent, but after going through some of his games, well, anyway. That's what happens when you're 200 points higher rated than your opponent. Well, more like 2000 points, but who's counting? d4 d5, knight c3 knight f6 and bishop f4, is the Joe Bava London system. But with the move c6, my opponent, who I'm happy to say, has recently increased his rating to 475, was about to suffer a very quick and painless death. I played e3, a move that usually entices my opponents to go bishop g4, to which I respond with f3, bishop h5, and h4, because all the way up into the 1500 elo range, players are just oblivious to the fact that this bishop is in huge danger. You'd be surprised how often players still go e6 in this position. Merry Christmas. Because after g4, bishop g6 and h5, this piece is a trapped piece. But my opponent played knight e4, taking me out of prep, because after takes, for all the books I've read, and videos I've watched, I've never seen this position on the board before. Now, let's be honest, if at your rating level, you're surprised by a move in the opening, it's probably a bad move. But don't waste precious seconds trying to refute it, if the refutation isn't immediately obvious. That's what chess principles are for. In the opening, you develop your pieces, preferably knights first, but since f3 is no longer an option, e2 will do just fine. So bishop c4 first, and just like that, you have two developed pieces, and your opponent has none. If that's not a refutation, I don't know what is. You should never move a piece twice in the opening unless you absolutely have to, that's chess principle. But instead of catching up in development, my opponent plays h5. Why? I replied with c3, and then he showed me why, bishop g4, hitting my queen. A terrible move, or as I like to call it, job security. As long as you all keep playing such chess, I will always be here making fun and educational content. Queen b3, and you can only defend one of these pawns, but my opponent stuck it to me, and defended 0 of them. a5, and it's checkmate in 3 moves. Can you spot it? That's okay, try spotting this, instead. There's something for everyone here at Mortal Chess. The move is bishop takes f7 check, king d7, followed by queen takes b7 check, and there's only one move left to defend, queen c7, after which queen takes c7 is checkmate. But I could have played bishop takes c7 instead, winning the queen, and then torturing my opponent for the next 20 moves. I wonder if you guys would unsubscribe after witnessing such sadism from your favorite chess teacher. But something tells me you've done worse in your games. But queen takes c7 checkmate marks the end of this short video and the beginning of my journey on chess.com, the only place where Zimbabwe can beat Spain, in anything. Happy November. My fellow men of culture, with your array of incognito tabs open beside this video. Take a moment. This, right here, is where you are. A tiny speck on a spinning rock, orbiting a star, dancing around a black hole, in a galaxy sailing through unending nothingness, towards a destination unknown. As we enter this holy month of November, remember that, in the vast cosmos, whatever you're doing with your right hand, holds absolutely zero significance. So fire away, gentlemen, for the universe cares not.